All right, good afternoon, everybody. All right, we got to try a little more. I'm from Philly, and when someone greets you, you got to give them something in return. So good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to see you all in this room. You look great. I see a little bit of mid-afternoon energy. I want to give you 10 seconds. Shake it out a little bit. Wake up a little bit. Figure out how you want to do it. Take 10 seconds. Looking good. Some people standing up, some people in their chair. However you want to do it is good. Great. Okay, so I teach at Science Leadership Academy, and in a very fortunate way, some of you have been able to visit us in Philadelphia. Those of you that have never visited, I welcome you to visit. SLA is an inquiry and project-based public magnet school. So this is a picture of me with my students, and a couple of unique things that you should know about SLA is I'm going to be talking about our work together. One is that we are a magnet school, which means students interviewed and they apply. But we intentionally take students from a range of academic backgrounds, and we intentionally represent the entire city of Philadelphia. So our student body has students from every zip code within the city. So I've taught at SLA for a little while, and I've taught in general longer than that. And one of the questions that preoccupies me is how to change the grammar of schools. And this phrase, the grammar of schools, it comes from the book Tinkering Towards Utopia. Excuse me. This is the idea that there are these assumptions that we all default to without even realizing it when we think about school. And we can name them right off the bat. The assumption is students are doing their work for a grade. The primary person who's going to look at their work is the teacher. And the reason for doing the work is because someone told them to do it. So this phrase really resonated with me when I read it in the book Tinkering Towards Utopia. And it resonated with me for a couple reasons. One, because as a student and as someone who's gone through many changes in my own life, my most transformational moments in my life did not happen in school. And of all the thousands of hours that I spent in schools, I can really count on maybe like half of one hand the number of times that a teacher or the product, the work that I was doing, impacted me deeply. And then I also spend thousands of hours with students, and I'm aware of this immense potential for this time and the fact that most often this time is not very memorable and not very transformational. Transformational. So I'm going to be sharing some different examples of work that my students have done. And you saw that the title of my talk is Art, Inquiry, and Student Voice. So I'm sharing 3 different examples with you. The first one is the language autobiography unit that my students did. And the idea that I want you to keep in mind is allowing students to explore and express ideas through multiple modalities. So this is a unit in an English class, and it started when we read the book, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. How many people have read this book? It's a wonderful book. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend reading it. So as a class, we read the book. We had many interesting discussions. We did all kinds of different activities, and then we zoned in more on our focus. And all my units have questions that focus the investigation or the inquiry that we're doing. So in this case, for this unit, the questions focus on language, power, and identity, and individuality and conformity. And I just want to point out to you before I move forward, these are questions that it doesn't matter who you are, what age you are, these are in all of our lives, and we see it around us in so many different ways. So whether you're a high school student, whether you're younger, whether you're older, whether you live out in the middle of the country or in a city somewhere else, these questions play a part in our daily reality, and they're complex. So there's ways that we can all begin unpacking them just by thinking of them at a first glance. So this unit began, after the book, the next stage of the unit began with students then thinking more about language in their lives. This is Ellen's paper, and the way it started was that Ellen, like all my students, began writing some scenes of memory of thinking about issues of language, identity, and power in her life. At the same time, we were reading essays from several different authors as they were talking about language, power, and identity in their lives. Students are developing more and more ideas, and it culminated with these language autobiographies. So this is a screenshot of the blog post that's Ellen's paper. Ellen's paper, along with many other papers, was particularly powerful. So Ellen is of Vietnamese and Chinese ancestry, and she's the first generation in her family that's fluent in English. So she often plays the role of translator. So her scenes of memory were about the fact that she's had to go to the doctor with her grandmother and translate for the doctor. And even when multiple family members are in the same room, sometimes Ellen is the person that translates between them. And the culminating moment in her paper was when she was at Whole Foods, and her dad works at the sushi counter at Whole Foods, and she was talking to her dad, and then a customer comes up and asks her dad a very specific question about the rice in the sushi. And Ellen is stepping forward, and she's about to translate for her dad. And before she gets a chance to translate, he answers the customer in English. And she has this really revelation in this moment that she's not always going to need to be the translator in her family. And it's quite a powerful paper. And students read excerpts of their papers to each other, and then they posted them to the web. And then I had to break it to them, you're not done. You actually just began this project. And the next stage is, and I will just say as an aside, I'm going to give you access to all the stuff. So I'm teasing you a little bit with some of this stuff. And this is Ellen's digital story. This was the next stage. So a digital story is still images and narration. For Ellen's digital story, what she did was she had her different relatives speak in their languages, introducing themselves. And then she took the ideas from her paper and translated them into this different modality, this different format, to then present it to a wider audience. So at this point, all the students have the paper that they wrote, they've shared it out loud, and they posted it to the web. They now have these digital stories that they put on the same blog post. And then I'm like, sorry, we're not done yet. But the next stage is actually this really amazing opportunity for us as a class. So this is an overpass that's right near our school. Some of you have seen it and can attest that it's not actually a very nice place. It's kind of like dark and a little bit nasty and not always so clean. And what we did was we created a public art installation in this overpass. And you can see these are large pictures of students that students are wheat pasting up on the wall. So students did the photo shoot. They had all different expressions. And then we had a selection process where we chose which photographs they were going to use. And this is from a different direction. I love this picture of Jamila where she's posing in the same posture as her portrait. And then underneath the portraits, we put quotes from their papers. So suddenly their work was public in all these different ways. It was public on the web. They had shared it in the school community. And now people that were just walking by on 22nd Street could see their work. And they could actually spy on these people who were seeing their work. And like, when I was walking to school today, I heard someone talking about my quote and things like that. And this is Dakota's quote that you can see most clearly here. She said, I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. I was either too white or too black. And that's just a part of her larger paper. So again, this idea that they're doing the work not just for my eyes, and they're creating this inquiry leads to multiple products, this work that is in multiple modalities. So that was example 1. Now comes example 2. The second example is about radio production. And as I talk about this, I want you to think about student choice and also about collaborating with professionals. So for this project, there were also guiding questions, and these guiding questions were really broad. This is a 12th grade English class. The first one was, what different stories need to be told? Again, it's this large, compelling question. Everyone probably has something that comes to their mind right away. And then what can you create that will influence others? For this project, we began by studying the form of short radio pieces, less than 10 minutes. And students listened to a range and started to analyze what does it take to make a high quality radio piece. And then we started to brainstorm what are some topics that would be interesting to create radio pieces about in our city or beyond. And students came up with all kinds of different ideas. 2 boys in my class were like, we want to make a piece about tabletop gaming. Everyone thinks teens are online all the time, and we spend all our hours tabletop gaming. Some kids who live in South Philly were like, we want to interview people that live next to the refinery that makes all that pollution. And so theirs was really about environmental racism and environmental justice. There was a real wide range of topics. Another group was like, we want to do something about underground hip hop in Philly, and we're going to interview people about that. They had to pitch their story ideas, and there was a format given to them for the pitch, to me and to Jeanette Woods. So Jeanette Woods was this amazing collaborator. She works for the NPR station in Philadelphia. And here's Kevin pitching to Miss Jeanette. And this was a very authentic process. Sometimes they would pitch to me and Miss Jeanette, and we're like, you're not there yet, but you can come back to us next week when Miss Jeanette is in again. And these are the ways you need to revise your pitch. And then when they got to a point where their pitch was close enough to being something that seemed like it could turn into something successful, we set them loose, and they had time to make their radio pieces. I'm going to tell you about Amanda's radio piece. That's Amanda in the center of the picture. So this was the second year I had been teaching Amanda, and I knew her as someone who took her work very seriously. but I was getting really frustrated with her because we were, I think, more than 2 weeks into this process, and she still had like just half a page of writing. And I kept checking in with her, and I couldn't really tell what was going on. And I was restraining myself from becoming the disciplinary teacher, like, you're losing points every day that it's late. And instead, I kept asking her questions, and I could tell there was something going on, but it took a while to figure it out. And eventually, what she explained to me was that she was really scared of telling the story. And she also didn't even know if she could tell it. And in the end, she did tell it. And the story is that Amanda, when she went to middle school, she went to a school where the other students had been there already. So she was the new kid. Amanda has a form of scoliosis, and she was bullied both for being the new kid and for looking a little different. And it was really severe when she first got to middle school, and no one really stepped in. But then, as she got older in middle school, she became a bully. And she actually was usually, at this point, the first person that would lash out at new kids or kids that were different. And she talks about it in her radio piece. Like, she would see the post come up online, and she'd be the first person to start the barrage against someone, a bullying. And so she wrote this piece and then recorded this piece called When the Bullied Becomes the Bully. It's quite a profound piece. Amanda went from being way behind in the project to spending dozens, if not hundreds of hours on this project. In the end, she recorded the radio piece, she mixed in music to like a professional level, and then in a wonderful way, Miss Jeanette put her radio piece on the air. So it was on the NPR station. Yeah. And it was this really celebratory moment for the class. And so we could listen to each other's radio pieces and celebrate the fact that they were all public on the web, and some of them were being heard by thousands of people. Again, I'm sorry, I'm teasing you. The link's right there. You'll have access to the slideshow, and you can listen to Amanda's piece later. Okay, my last example is from the Art in the Open Festival, and I want you to think about students fully in the role of artists for this example. For this unit, the guiding questions were, what different things make art powerful, and what does it take to engage in an entirely new collaborative process? So this one really pushed students even farther beyond what I just gave you in the first two examples. For this process, we were out of the classroom, and this is a picture of the Armory in Philadelphia, where students are learning the process of how to become site-specific dancers. That's S-I-T-E, site. So they have to learn how to tune to a location, observe what's around them, begin to create movements and sound that reflect that location, and in the end, they were creating pieces that were part of a larger professional arts festival. So this was really intimidating. In the beginning, many students were like, I don't know what we're doing, I don't get it, and there was understandable resistance in the beginning. I collaborated with the Leah Stein Dance Company. I don't know if you can see Leah's kind of in the middle of that picture. And so in the beginning, it's awkward. And we also have a writing component as they're developing their observation skills. And then they're in groups and they're out within, I think it was a 5-block radius within the school, near the school. They choose their sites. And they're going through this same process again. And during class hours, we're visiting them at their sites. And in the beginning, sometimes it's just a mess. It's a total mess. And then we keep feeding them examples of what they can be doing. And we give them an opportunity to see what other groups have created. And there's all these steps along the way. And then when performance day comes, it's pretty overwhelming in that not only do they have hundreds of students from our school, but they have people who have come for this wider arts festival that many artists are a part of. And at this point, I would challenge anyone to look at a picture like this, and the first thing you think is not, oh, that's just a bunch of high school students doing their thing, because the students have inhabited this role of artists and dancers. They've been rehearsing for about a week and a half, and they fully inhabit what it means to be a performer in a public space. So, through all these examples, I want you to think about the fact that the work was not just for me. Of course, in many ways, I was the first person that saw it. I was the person that gave the most feedback. But in the end, it went way beyond my eyes. And my feedback, hopefully, was some of the least important feedback compared to their peers cheering for them at the end of a dance performance. During one of those dance performances, I was very validated as I looked over to a colleague of mine, another teacher, and she had tears streaming down her face. And I was like, okay, it's not just me. And it was great to see that this work has impact on people from all kinds of different backgrounds. So all these learning processes end with a process of reflection. So it's not just that you've done the project and you're done and now let's move on to the next thing. Students both write and they talk about what they learned and the different challenges that they face throughout the process. So to bring it back, I'd like to just remind you of that idea of changing the grammar of school and think about the different ways that art, inquiry, and student voice really entirely change some of the things that we take for granted that are basic elements of school and instead make it much more of a transformational experience. Thank you so much. Thank you.